Welcome back, everybody, to Borak Overseas B.O.S. We're at
Welcome
episode
back,
3.
everyone, all the listeners. Thank you for the support.
Yes,
You're
if you
recording
are,
our third episode, Adria. We survived.
yes, yeah, we survived. Oh my goodness! Like when we first started this podcast, I didn't think we were gonna make it this far because I was like, who are we going to invite on the show? But we actually
Definitely.
have we actually had people who said yes to us. That's amazing. And actually, we are recording this episode literally 2 days after our second episode that we just
So,
released today, right? So today is 8th of April, by the way, guys. When you listen to this, it's probably I don't know, mid of April, I think. And also it's gonna be Hari Raya by then, right? So
yeah,
explains.
I can see you already in the Raya mood.
Yes, my baju kurung today. Selamat Hari Raya, everybody.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
I yeah, I must say one thing though. This I have to say, Mohan. I have to tell you, this is a Sarawak motif.
Mm.
Okay.
Oh, that looks really nice, actually. Yeah. You just told me before this call, anyways. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay.
I'm
Not
just
that
gonna act
excited.
surprised. Oh, it looks really nice, interesting.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, for the listeners and all our audience again, I am from the very beautiful land of Sarawak. So okay, we're not gonna go down that argument of which state is the greatest in Malaysia at this point. But today is a very exciting day as well, right, Mohan? Like we again have a really exciting guest with us today, and personally, I've been very, very excited to speak to him, and to what he's doing right now. Right, I've actually been following all his initiatives and the work he's been doing ever since I think I was still in the US back then. That was 4 or 5 years ago. And I was so excited when I reached out to him and he said yes. And I was telling you, Mohan, oh my god, we have to get this guest on the show because he has so much to share and that's really exciting, right? Show some excitement, Mohan.
Actually, yes. No, I was thinking about. I googled his name, and then a lot of things came up. So I was like, "Wow, we are lucky.
Yeah.
We are lucky to have him on the show."
Yeah, we are indeed very lucky. So I think without further ado, we definitely want him to give us a brief intro, and then we are gonna start digging deep dive into every single those credentials that he's got. So our guest this week for episode 3 is Hazim.
Hi.
Hi, Hazim.
Hi, Hazim. Yeah. Kick us off with a brief intro of yourself and prove to everybody how excited we are and why we should be excited.
Tell us who Hazim really is.
Yeah, I'll give a quick one first. To know who I really am, we'll go deeper later. But yes, I'm Hazim from Ipoh, Borak. I'm in Toronto right now, but yeah, I just came here from Ipoh just now, back for Raya. Went to boarding school at 13. So that's one of the more important turning points in life. I was in college as an Malacca for 5 years, from Form 1 till SPM. Did A-levels in KYUAM, went to the UK under Petronas Scholarship to do accounting and finance in Warwick University. Then I went straight to the US for my master's. After that, I was in MIT for the Master of Finance, Financial Engineering course. This was 2017. Yeah, right after that, I was with the World Bank for it was about 5 years. Yeah, 5 years with the World Bank. From 2018, I officially left them June 2023. So almost about a year ago. Since then, I've been truly full-time on the startup, which is Coffee Space. That is a brief overview of the journey I've been for the past 10, 15 years. Yeah.
Exciting. Wow. That's quite a journey, yeah, that you've had there. So I think we'll kick us off with let's start with the early timeline, okay?
Early part,
early part of your lives, when you first thought about going overseas, right? Just curious, there are so many options to study locally versus going overseas. Why were you set on going overseas to study your undergrad and then subsequently postgrad, whatnot? Yeah.
It's a function of a few variables, I would say. I would say 3 main variables. One is the influence from the school itself, right? KYS is a school where, at least at the time, 80% of people would fly overseas. So It
Oh.
was almost expected. It was the KPI of Miss Lai, our career school counselor. Right? He's like, if you don't fly, you're gonna ruin my KPI. Yeah, of course. Yeah, you go deeper.
Oh.
Why is this part of the? But yeah,
Like,
that was
Okay.
fun.
if you don't go, you feel like a reject.
Yes. This is one of those, and it's purely wrong, right? I'll go deeper. Like, yeah, I spoke to friends why, for certain scenarios, it is absolutely better to study, with courses in universities here relative to some of these countries where, like, yeah, you don't speak the language, like Czechoslovakia, Poland, like, yeah, even like. Yeah, there's just a lot of countries where if you have to learn the language of that country, it's not easy, right? Like, yeah, even Germany, France, Japan, for that matter. I have friends who went to these countries. But yeah, for the most part, it was influence from the school. It was also influence from parents. Both of my parents, I mean, they went to undergrad, but yeah, they did go to the UK for their master's specialization. So, like, yeah, my mom was in LSE for a master's. My dad was in Hammersmith Hospital for his radiology specialization. So there was not only just the influence of going abroad, but specifically to the UK, right? US, Australia was never in the discussion. Like, yeah, like I just never even thought of applying to the US for the undergrad whatsoever. Like, yeah. So the influence from parents was also there, but it also is a function of like what scholarships are available, right? What opportunities are available.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, if you get it, I mean, like I spoke to my parents, it was very clear. If there was no scholarship, yeah, I will not fly. If there is a scholarship, then yeah, we'll consider, the merits of doing so otherwise. And going to boarding school, A-levels in KYUM helped prepare to be more independent, to be a bit more comfortable being away from home. Because yeah, that's another thing, right? Not everyone is fine just living abroad, for the first time being apart from family. It's a lot to take in on top of being a university student. But yeah, those were some of the factors at play.
Some of that was a very well researched, I would say, decision to go to US.
Just about experience.
I just go with the flow. My mom said,
It's just what I went through. Like, yeah. So I'm just sharing, like, yeah, sort of what made us do all these things, right? What made us, me and my friends, like, all apply for this. But yeah, in my scenario, it was these three variables. So, yeah.
So, was US the? Do you regret going to US for that?
No. I mean, it's good
No.
for my master's for sure. No, even so, right? Even for undergrad, looking back, maybe we should have. I mean, maybe I should have applied, but it's just there's reasons you go through certain phases in life, and there are things I know for a fact I only did learn because I went through the UK instead of the US. So there's definitely value in getting a broader perspective from multiple countries, beyond just one. Like, so for that, in terms of like the friends I made, I did do an internship in the UK actually, but it was with Petronas London. So this as my second year internship.
Damn,
So yeah, I was in their Warwick Exchange Tower office in Connecticut. So, yeah.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. I didn't know Petronas had like a London office. Okay.
They do.
Wow. Oh, okay. I'm curious, what is the difference? Because you went to undergrad in the UK and then postgrad in the US, right? And it's the opposite for me actually. I swapped because undergrad for me was US, then UK is postgrad. So in your opinion, like what's the difference? Like as a student or as a student, because you were a student both places. Like what do you think was the major difference?
So it's not like for like because undergrad is different from master.
Yep, that's true.
Right?
That's true.
Certain thing, yeah. But having spoken to my friends who did undergrad we can compare notes basically. But yeah, the UK has a lot less graded coursework, and this underpins a lot of the lifestyle choices in the UK because when not everything is graded each week, right? You truly can live as you did for SPM A-levels, just cram it all in 1-2 weeks and still sort of hope to get first class. It's harder to do so at university, but it's still not impossible. You cannot get the top grades in the US GPA-wise if you do not do the weekly assignments. Everything was graded, right? I'm not sure about undergrad, but masters, it wasn't even attendance at class, right? It was participation. Again, it was business school. Even if you attend and you don't talk, you're not going to get this 5-10% mark that you can get just from participation. And because it's graded in a curve, you may not get an A simply because of this one variable, right? So the US system of education makes it such that is more rigorous in the sense of the number of things you need to do relative to the UK. UK has a lot more optional things. You can do some of these assignments. If you know it's not graded, then your professors cannot really blame you. Because it's about the system, right? The system affects you quite a bit. So because many things are not graded in the UK per se, you become a lot more active if you want in terms of extracurriculars. So, you cannot imagine starting a conference like Warwick Asean Conference from scratch if I was in the US per se. Especially the first time, I pitched to Tony, right? Tony Fernandes was there for a private dinner in London. So it was me and my friend. We were 21-year-old kids, right? We're like, Tony is here. Maybe we should just pitch him an idea. And UK has a lot more of the. They just come over. A lot of people go for holidays there, so they join. Tony was there. EPL was still Queens Park Rangers was still part of EPL at this point. This was 2015. So he came right after a game, right? He and a few friends went to a QPR game and came for this dinner with 70 Malaysian students. I mean, these kind of don't simply happen, right? But they do happen in London. London is that accessible to the whole world. US, you have to be a lot more deliberate to find people in the US. UK, everyone is in London, literally, right? Ministers, billionaires, whatever, right? They're just in London. It's that, there's that international hub. So, I mean, Warwick Asean Conference was something I did. I started a social enterprise called ASEAN Nights, also Southeast Asian related, building on the springboard that was Warwick Asean Conference. And again, right, Warwick Asean Conference is still around today. It's already in its 10th edition this year, I think. So building things like these was harder, but again, it was just a 12-month master's I did. It was very, very rigorous in MIT. So I could not spend as much building something from scratch during my master's. There's a lot more, but this is optional, right? It's not because of the UK education per se. It's just what it allows when you have flexibility of time. So if you're not personally motivated to do these things, then you still won't do it personally.
In UK, they probably let you have fun all year and then just
People travel a lot, right? On average, I traveled to 8 countries during my 3 years each year. So I traveled to 24 countries during those 3 years, right? You don't do that. You may go to 24 states in the US, but it's not nearly as diverse as visiting 24 countries across Europe and more. You just backpack. Really, it was budget traveling. You could fly. I have friends who flew from London to Milan over a weekend, right? Just to have lunch. It was £40 return. You don't get that within interstate travel in the US. You can literally just buy a £20 ticket to almost any part of Europe. You buy it early enough.
Oh, wow. Okay. I think I can really relate to a lot of what you said as well, because that's exactly what I've been doing. Doing budget traveling now and I realized I couldn't do this as easily as I could in the US. But wow, I can't believe we are actually speaking to the Warwick Asean Conference founder as well. Wow, your founder's a lot of things.
Exactly. Just Google it.
It's it's not a disease. It's a bug, right? Once you have this creation founder bug, you always just want to come up with things from scratch. So this started right from high school. I can go deeper, but this.
Probably we should start a series just to share the whole journey from everything.
Every episode is different initiative. Okay, wow, that's amazing. Thanks for sharing. This is like all your university years kind of thing when you were in school and whatnot, right? Just really curious right now a lot about your early career, right? Because it seems that you are very passionate about ASEAN in general, right? A lot of things you start seem to be related to as of now. We haven't talked about the later part of your life. Related to Malaysia or Southeast Asia, right? So maybe let's talk about your first career, right? Because I believe your first career was also overseas. I believe. Why did you go back to Malaysia, or why choose to be overseas? Feel free to tell us what your early career was and whatnot. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, there were multiple variables. There's some which I may not disclose right now. It's
okay, no worries.
Okay. But basically, yeah, once you study in a country, especially like US, you do get this 1 3 year period, right? If you do a STEM related course, you get 3 years of a working visa to try, get experience abroad. And again, right, it's almost like a one-way ticket. The moment you come back, it's harder to simply come back and try to get this work experience abroad. But it's also because I was in finance and I was more interested in development finance in particular. So because yeah, you're just talking about general finance, you can get jobs anywhere, right? In Malaysia, in Qatar, in the UK, Australia, US. But when you talk about development finance specifically, there was really only two institutions I was interested in. It was either the World Bank or IMF, right? So it's either International
Yeah.
Monetary Fund, but IMF generally caters to people who have PhDs, like or at least like 3 5 years of work experience. Even the World Bank, generally the minimum is a master's usually, but yeah, it's master's plus 2 3 years work experience. So I knew even for my background coming out of the master's with no full-time work experience, it was going to be harder to get a job in the World Bank. But yeah, the World Bank has an office in Malaysia, but it's more research based and it's not portfolio management wise, right? Like yeah, my background was more finance, financial, asset management. At that point I was already, so when I finished my master's, I already had CFA level 1, and I knew for a fact I wanted to continue level 2, level 3, which I did finish during my couple of years, first 2 years in the World Bank. But a pure finance role in an international development firm, like it was very very specific, right? What I wanted, and it really World Bank was the top choice. It was the only thing that covered that whole Venn diagram, and that's why I applied to the World Bank. Yeah.
And also good pay, right?
Yes. That is an right. Like So okay, the thing which I said I couldn't really say. No, I can, right? Like it was an this equilibrium of like expectations versus like what is. So I was a Petronas scholar, right? So clearly, like technically, you're supposed to serve the bond. I did want to serve my bond, but it was at a time where there was no specific ruling about continuing to study for masters after undergrad. So when there is no exact policy, right, it becomes hard because then the HR people at Petronas needed to decide what to do, right? And again, it wasn't about me per se. It was about if they allowed me to do my masters, it becomes a precedent, right? Then they will need to allow everyone who wanted to do masters, or at least there needed to be some guidelines. There was no guidelines at the time when I asked. So when you do not serve your bond, of course you got to pay it back, right? Which is what I did, and it's just a lot easier to pay back the bond, the loan, right? So it became a convertible loan. Again, truly, it's the best loan you can get because there's still no interest whatsoever, right?
Yeah.
Is the least I needed to do back to them, of course, after the opportunity they provided. Like I at the very least wanted to pay back the loan as soon as possible, and working in the US allowed me to do that essentially. I did not have plans to continue in the US until I knew for a fact that I needed to pay back this loan because when I did the masters, it was basically considered like me as not serving the bond, and hence the scholarship converted into a loan.
But I think
okay,
but it makes a lot of sense though, because like the reason why you had to start overseas is because of opportunities, right? Like if especially when you're starting a career right out of school, right? You really need to go somewhere where you can grow, right? And if like and sometimes it is true, and it's true for certain fields that are very super technical or super specific as well, that are not available back in Southeast Asia or Malaysia, and we people have no other choice but to look for opportunities overseas. And it's something that comes with a lot of, I think, a logical reasoning for it. But out of like curiosity, how's the work culture like? If because you have friends from Malaysia as well, I'm pretty sure you guys talk about like how what work life balance or work culture is like back home in Malaysia or Southeast Asia versus that of in the US. What do you think about that? Because you've
but whether the grass is really green on the other side.
Yes.
There is no one answer to that. It really depends on what job you're doing and your boss, right? Who your boss is really determines your experience quite a bit. So, because yeah, just like a PhD supervisor determines how your experience doing the PhD is, it's the same for work. Your boss is the one you're going to interact with the most, who's going to basically almost determine like, yeah, your career trajectory, how much you grow, how much you learn, how fast you learn. So the exact role you do, the boss that you have, and again, right, like in terms of work-life balance, like, yeah, it can be very, very bad, right? If you're working in investment banking, no matter where in the world, it is very bad. Like in my case, because it was the World Bank, there was a lot more work-life balance, of course. Like, yeah, I do have friends who have, work-life balance here in Malaysia, like, who don't have work-life balance in the US and vice versa, right? Like, if you're in audit in Malaysia, then yeah, it can be very, very bad. But audit can be bad anywhere. I mean, would be bad almost anywhere in the world. So I wouldn't say just because of the country, like, the difference is definite. It is more a function of which company role, which role you're doing in which company, and yeah, how the culture is within your immediate team, i.e., how your boss runs the whole thing. Like, I had a very workaholic boss in the World Bank, so even though officially it was like 9 to 5, but no, like I definitely, there were nights I stayed till midnight, 3 a.m. and all, right? But it's also, I was new to the job. I needed to learn a lot more things, so I did things I didn't need to do, right? I didn't need to stay every night to till midnight to learn things. But the first 6 months, these people I worked with, they had what, right, 10, 15, 20 years experience. Like, I was the youngest in the whole of my department of 50 people for the whole 4 or 5 years I was there. It was only when I told them I was going to leave to do the startup, then they hired 2 people to take over my role, who I trained before leaving. Yeah, but
Nice.
otherwise, the youngest, right? And there was just a lot of things I didn't know. Whenever they mention things I didn't understand, I will write it in a book, and that night I'll read about it. So like, yeah, that's why I didn't need to stay till midnight, I said. But yeah, I was just staying these extra hours to.
So it's always a choice.
It's always a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even like the UK, as we were talking about just now, you don't need to start a conference. You don't need to start something, go out of your way in the UK. But if you want to do it, it provided the opportunity. But yeah, it is almost always a choice. Yeah.
Yep, I agree. It's always almost a choice. And so in other words, again, the answer is quite similar. The grass isn't necessarily greener on the other side. It all depends. Very economist
Depends
answer.
on your region.
There's a lot of things to sacrifice being abroad, right? Like I just mentioned, like I haven't really been back for full Ramadan plus Raya for the past 11 years, right? Since I flew to the UK. And like, yeah, a big part, no matter what big celebration that Malaysians would usually have with family back home, like, yeah, you're going to have to, the weddings of my friends, family members I have missed, like, like, yeah, there's just a lot of things which, yeah, you don't know for a fact. These are things you have to let go of till you do it. And yeah, it's definitely not something, it's not something for everyone. Like, yeah. So,
makes sense. Like, do you foresee yourself going back to like Malaysia? Just curious, like after being away for that long.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes, absolutely. It's what I'm doing now is almost a hybrid mode because it's my own company and I have visas which allow me to come and go within the US as I wish, right? It's the entrepreneur visa equivalent, the O1 visa. I mean, I'm in the process of getting it. My co-founder already got it, but yeah, that was by choice. But basically with this visa, you don't need, it just depends on the requirements of what you're building, right? The customers you're serving, when it's your own startup, you can work anywhere, anytime. But because of that, the joke was like, yeah, then you work all the time everywhere.
Yeah, that's probably
because that is just how the startup life is. But yeah, I've been back in Malaysia for the past 4 months, right? Like this is the longest I've ever been home. I mean, it's just because I can do it. Yeah, it's just once you figure out how you get users, how you get partners, investors, like, yeah, I mean, 90% of our users are still in the US. Most of our investors are from the US, but it doesn't matter, right? Like, yeah, as long as the company runs, you can convince them. COVID changed a lot of this world order. And because of that, like, yeah, I can. So I'm doing what I'm doing now is almost like a hybrid life. I'm going to spend about 6-9 months in the US, 3 to 6 months in Malaysia, and this will shift, right? As Europe becomes our target market, aggressively we want to grow. As Middle East becomes the target, etc. Like, yeah, I'm going to live in these different places for 3 months a year or something. Like, so there is no more I'm no longer bound by a specific
That's
country. And it's exactly what I wanted, which is one of the reasons I wanted to be in the startup life.
So it's some sort of digital nomad life.
Yes, exactly.
And
And not
so,
many things allow you to do this, right? But the startup world is one of those rare things that allows you to lead a life like this.
and sorry, just out of curiosity, for my own personal curiosity as well, is it what visa is this that allows you to do this
Called the
in
O1 visa. The O1 visa is called the
O1?
it's the extraordinary ability visa. Yeah.
Okay, and
The
this is
O1 visa,
this is a US visa because you're based in the US, just for our
US visa.
listeners.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Oh, okay. And it allows you to like move around and
I mean,
is it?
you can build a company. Basically, it's just a visa that allows you to be in the US if you want. But otherwise, again,
Oh,
right, we always have the right to return to Malaysia. In the UK, you can always stay 3 weeks. In most
Yep.
countries in the world, you can just visit 6 months as you wish. And when it's your own company, you cannot really say you're there for work, right? Like you can always say you're there for a conference, a partner meeting. So it's a lot harder for them not to allow you to come in, because if they know for a fact is to find a job in that country, then they might feel more defensive, right? But if you're just a founder building a company, they will ask, where is the company based? We can say it's incorporated in the US, but our users are global. So like, what are they gonna do, right? So yeah, but that is until we have a lot of employees in the US, sure, then there's more physical bounds, like you need to be there with your employees. But even so, I already have multiple friends. One of my friends, he is backed by Y Combinator. His whole team members, about 15 of them, are based in the US, but he's running the whole show as the CEO founder from like Saudi. And like,
oh
so,
wow, okay.
and he's been running it for the past couple of years. They're getting to their Series A already. I'm like, yeah, it works. And their investors don't care, their employees. So he just does US hours as long as there are overlaps. But even now, right, between me and my co-founder Corinne, so she's back here now. But for the past 3 months, I was working with her remotely, and like, yeah, you just find ways. Again, because of COVID, people have found ways to make it work. Yeah.
Well, this is very interesting. I didn't know that this digital nomad is such a common thing right now, because I definitely have heard of my friends who really wanna all their work is all remote, and then they just move from different country. They just travel and they work in different places. And I think recently I also saw like this Malaysian couple on LinkedIn who said that they were both doing remote jobs and they decided to travel to US, France, UK, Europe, and they were traveling while working.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, sounds quite intense, but you're right, Hazim. Like it's really this is really a thing right now, and I'm glad that there is actually a visa in the US that I'm not aware of, called O1 visa, that allows you to do that.
Between my co-founder and I, we've done like 6-7 different visas in the US. So like, yeah, it's just you just figure out. That's the whole startup life. You have something you got to solve, you'll find ways to solve it, and that's what, because of the visa, situation. Like, yeah, we've done 7 different visas between the two of us by this point. So.
Wow. Okay. That is really, when there's a will, there's a way, and yeah. Sorry, Mohan, you wanted to ask a question?
No, keep going on. So that's a great insight actually, because a lot of people actually maybe they want to start something overseas, or they want to venture into something that not just Malaysia, anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
Like most of the time, immigration might be the issue a lot of people are facing.
That's right.
So I think whoever wants to move or pursue their dreams or move on with their life or anything,
there's a way. That's right.
Yeah.
There's always a way. Like, yeah, some are harder than others, of course. It may not be easy, but in general, there is a solution to most things. Yeah.
Agree.
Talking about venturing, what are the initial challenges you faced starting business overseas? What are the initial stages, the challenges you faced in the initial challenges when you decided to pursue your dream to co-found this app?
Actually, before going to that question, also, I think it would be very interesting for you to tell the story of how this coffee space journey.
Sorry.
Yeah, and the challenges. Yes. So that's
give us the full picture.
Yes.
So you don't. Some people overnight they decide, okay, I want to be a founder, and like they leave their job, right, and to do it. But to me, that is not optimal. As a risk manager, you want to manage the downside risks of this in particular, because it is a very high risk thing to do, right? If you do not manage the different things that make it very high risk. So one is like, have you validated it is an actual idea worth pursuing, right? Like, how do you know for a fact this is, and again, are you trying to do a social enterprise? Are you trying to do a nonprofit? Are you trying to do a business? Are you trying to do a venture backable business? And these are all four very different things, right? You need to know which of these you are actually building. Once you know which one you want to build, and then you got to make sure what you're working on actually allows it to be any of these four things, right? Can it truly be a profitable business that doesn't require you to raise a lot of funding? So maybe it's not a startup that's going to be a unicorn, but you're not going to have all the pressures that make it a lot more likely for the company to fail, right? If it's only your company, you're bootstrapping, you're financing it yourself as you work full time, you don't have a burn rate, you don't have to think, have the mental pressure of like not knowing if you can pay your rent and all. So the ideal way that I've mentioned people, so specifically because we wanted to go, is either 3 or 4, right? We wanted to either be a business that is profitable at least, where, it covers most of our living costs, it will justify the opportunity cost of us living our jobs, or truly, right? It can be number 4, where it truly can be a unicorn by itself. And like, maybe it's just a 10% chance, but you do whatever to optimize it possibly being, to optimize for that 10% chance of it being, and again, not 10% become unicorns, right? Like, 10% is just the survival rate of startups generally. The number that actually do go on to become unicorns is like 1/50th, 1/100th of that, right? So like, it really is. And you need to be fine. If it doesn't work out, are you fine with that? So to the question, I did not know I wanted to become a founder, right? At least not from the perspective of starting a business or a startup that is venture backable. What I knew was that I liked to create things, is what I did from high school, as said. So even from KYS, I created the house club system of the school, right? I loved Harry Potter. I just felt like you have all these inter-house things. It's very weird for there not to be a cup for who wins the whole. And again, right, the demerit solves some of the disciplinarian issues and the merit points. So I created this 20-30 page doc of what the house club of College Asean Science should be, right? I based it off of some research on like, what Hogwarts and all did. Again, the concept itself, and house club is not something new, right? There are schools that already run it, especially boarding schools, where you have a lot of the inter-house performances, sports, whatever, right? Like, there's a lot of different things they try to instill in boarding school from the competitive side. So I created the house club there. And I feel satisfaction. I feel, the sense of like content when I know it's something that lasts a long time, right? This house club system is still here till today. And like, it affects a large part of what the student life is, right, over there, which I felt. So I only did it in Form 5. The first 4 years, I just felt it was lacking. So it was one of the manifestos I came up with when I was like, running for the elections there. And same thing, right? For KYUEM, it was in the middle of the jungle. So I will always look at what is the gap in the market here, right? KYUEM was in Lembah Bring and no one ever came. And I'm like, and we were very much siloed. We were not really engaged from, with the wider world. And there's this point, internet was still not as, as pervasive. Not everyone simply had smartphones at the time. Like, this was when people still had to go to the computer lab to have the phones we used was Nokia 3310. Like, it's just, I went through that phase of like, the technological cycle, right, of progress. So I started the KYUEM summit in KYUEM with some friends. So I always had friends to do this with. Sure. Even the house cup, I designed the whole thing, but I validated it with friends, right, the other people. And this becomes something you just like to do, right? This is what they call the serial founder. Like, once you create founder. Something, and again, right, what the definition of serial founder is, some people define it only as people who like start a company, sell the company, and start it. But founder can be defined in many ways, right? As long as you create something from scratch, you are a founder of that thing. It can be a nonprofit, it can be, a passion, a hobby of yours. But it's something I've done again and again. High school, KYUEM, Warwick, like, I just couldn't stop, right? Like, every place I went, I would want to do something. So, and once you get to the working life, it's a bit different, right? You can create things from scratch at work, or like maybe you do it outside of work during the time you had. So to this specifically, when I was working with the World Bank, like, yeah, I was purely, I was learning a lot the first few years. And again, right, even the fourth, fifth year.
Actually, I'm
was,
just curious about something, because you said you worked at the World Bank, right? Is it okay for you to share with us what development finance is? Because I realize some listeners may not know what that kind of
Exactly.
is. So just a side note, then you can continue your story. Sorry.
It's finance that's not purely necessarily private market based, right? Like, yeah. And so it's not just companies. When people are trying to raise capital, where, it could be people in Asia, it could be people in Africa, they can go to different routes to raise that funding. They can go to a private bank, they can raise private money from angel investors, from they could go to government for grants. But development finance specifically finances things which have a more wider economic social impact rather than necessarily directly related to ROI from the dollar perspective alone. Yeah. There are different metrics. This goes closer to the ESG, different related metrics, right? Like environmental, social governance. So World Bank does not only look at the absolute returns of these investments when they give loans or like make equity investments. There is the other metrics of like how much impact will this give in terms of the number of lives, quality adjusted life years this is going to change, right, in terms of the vicinity of this project. So because of that, there's a lot of specific things to the World Bank that allows them to do this. One is like they can just issue a AAA bond in the market, raise at a very low interest rate. If you raise at just 2-3% relative to institutions which are not AAA, where you need to raise at 5-6% because of the credit risks implied in terms of your borrowing. So yeah, World Bank allows, so development finance is more about financing things related to development where it's things related to like economic impact, bringing people out of poverty, raising education levels in a country, which is not necessarily fully, it still has to be sustainable, but it's not where you're trying to optimize profits at all costs.
Okay, gotcha.
That's
that makes a
interesting.
interesting.
I think by the end of this podcast, I think I can be a banker too.
okay, Laura, okay. That's quite funny. Okay, sorry.
So
back
to
to
the startup
your story.
specifically,
Yeah.
to the startup, I just had a little more time, right? During COVID, instead of just working from the office, you worked remotely from home. It also meant as long as you finished the work, you had all this time extra. Yeah, because in the office, you won't necessarily just explore other things, right? Hobbies, etc. But at home, as long as you finish the work, your boss will not really care what you do on top, right? So that's when I wrote an article. I started doing a lot of these calls. I just needed human interaction, right? I'm 96% extroverted. Not going to the office was a problem for me from the human interaction perspective. So what I did was just whoever reached out to me on Facebook, LinkedIn, right? I will just say, let's do a call this weekend. So on average, I was doing about 5 to 10 of these calls every weekend during COVID.
5
so
to
what
10.
happened was Yes. I was doing a lot of them, right? These people reaching out to know more about how to break into development finance, how to do CFA, like should they do CFA, how to get into MIT, how to get into World Bank, all these things. So I was just doing calls related to a lot of these educational, professional related topics. But yeah, so one of these people I spoke to, even before COVID, was actually someone called Kartik Nagarajan. So he was 7 years younger. He just finished his SPM in 2018 when I started at the World Bank. But he wanted to do either PPE, philosophy, politics, economics, or computer science, neither of which was what I did, right? But I'm like, but let's chat anyway. I was, impressed that an 18-year-old who just finished SPM would reach out to someone who's like 7 years elder. I didn't do that, right, when I was 18, to know about what to do post-secondary school life. So I spoke to Kartik. Then I'm like, okay, you clearly know quite a bit about the PPE route. You've done model UN, you've done debates, etc. So let's go deeper into this computer science interest validation, right? So I told him I can't really do much, but just do one of these Harvard's, first year online courses. Just do 1 hour or something. And I'll make some intros to some of my friends working in Facebook, Google, doing masters, PhDs in universities, right? So over a period of about 2-3 years, I made about 20, 30 intros for him probably. But what this unlocked in terms of his mind, the things he did truly mesmerized me. And that was the thing that kickstarted the first idea I wanted to work on, which was Council Lab, right? Like it was a side project. It was not meant, I didn't know it was going to be a startup, but to to execute on any idea from scratch generally is a lot easier if you have at least one other person who is as passionate about it as you. It's a lot harder to create something from scratch when you do it alone, purely from the accountability motivation perspective, right? And even being overwhelmed. You may not have necessary skill sets, you don't have all the time to do it. You will feel too overwhelmed to do it alone. So so I posted about the experience of guiding Kartik on Facebook, LinkedIn, right? I didn't know what was going to happen out of it. But yeah, Corinne was one of the people who read that article and she reached out to Kartik, right? Yeah. Corinne and I met at some random event in the US in 2018, about 1-2 months separate to Kartik reaching out. So these were like two parallel stories that had nothing to do with each other that converged in 2020 when I wrote this article. And Corinne at this point had graduated from Wharton from UPenn, right? And she's like, Kartik, I'm now with Facebook. I just started about 1-2 months ago. I saw in Hazim's article, you're taking a gap year post A-levels because you don't know, because Kartik got into Columbia, he didn't have a scholarship. So and it was COVID, right? To pay high rates for tuition fees, having a COVID experience of education where you're doing it remote just didn't make much sense. So I mentioned Kartik is taking a gap year to self-learn computer science. So that's what Corinne reached out to him for. Let me guide you. I had a lot of people guiding me to get to Facebook, right? To get into Wharton, etc. So let me help you if I can do anything this year. So Kartik got 20, 30 intros for me, but he made the one intro that got me my co-founder. And I cannot compare. So that's what he did, right? Like when he made the intro, I didn't know I was going to get a co-founder, right? But what I got was a partner to explore that idea with. And eventually he became a co-founder. As you go deeper, right? So to the startup thing, we did not know we were going to create a startup. What we did was every weekend, as I was still with the World Bank, Corinne was with Facebook, this was COVID 2020, 21. We just did things over weekends. Every Sunday night, we'll talk for 3 hours. We'll read a startup book. We'll discuss that book. We'll watch a video. We'll interview people who had the problem that we wanted to help solve, right? So that's what we did for many months. Council Lab was initially purely just a side project. It was only once you go deeper, you start validating, you apply to something like an accelerator like Y Combinator. You start going deeper into how this could be a company, right? Not just a platform you build out of hobby to help people, which can be, there are many people creating apps purely just to release it to the market and help people out, right? It's not for them to leave their jobs and fully have this as their main source of income. But so you go deeper, you apply to accelerators, you create a deck, you raise a round. So at some point, once you raise a round, you sort of think you gotta be serious about doing it full time, right? So that's what happened. It was just the natural process of it being an idea to you spending more time to validate it, to it being an actual deck that you present to possible investors, to you closing around. So you do time.
So you guys actually raised a sort of like a pre-seed round, and that probably inspired
the angel, family friends.
Angel.
We wouldn't. Pre-seed generally, you would have more sophisticated angels or an institutional investor. So we initially just raised a friend's family and close angel round.
Is that what inspired the? Is that what inspired the brave move to leave your day jobs? Because I know for our listeners, the co-founder Karen is actually my friend as well. So who I met through USS, who was also kind of my mentor in the early days. And I know she left Facebook to work on Council Lab and then now Coffee Space. So just curious, what inspired you guys to take that move? Is it because you raised a round, or was there an angel round, or was there something else? Curious.
So this is what we learned the hard way, I guess. It wasn't optimal, right? But when you incorporate a company, when you own more than 10% of any company in the world, you need to declare that to your employer. At least in the US. I don't know about other parts of the world. But because we incorporated Council Lab to apply to Y Combinator, and you don't even need to do that, right? Again, these are just things you learn, mistakes you make as first-time founders. We didn't know that it mattered when you incorporate your company, right? We just thought, yeah, we are serious about this. Let this be a commitment for us to do this more seriously. Let's incorporate. So when you incorporate and come cycle where you have to do this reporting to your employer every year, right? Like, yeah, World Bank, Facebook will ask you to report, do you own anything more than 10%? Like, yeah, it's just the conflict of interest annual review. Like, yeah, they do for everyone. So we had to declare because we incorporated, right? Of course, we could have just not declared, but that's wrong, right? Like, yeah, you don't want to do things which are illegal, of course. So we declared it. I told the World Bank, she told Facebook, and like, yeah, World Bank's ethics committee, there was someone from the ethics committee who interviewed me, right? Just to understand what is Council Lab, how would it interfere? Would there be a conflict with my role in the World Bank? And clearly there wasn't, right? Like, yeah, there was no overlap whatsoever with what I was doing in the World Bank, which was more risk management, portfolio management for like World Bank's, IFC specifically, International Finance Corporations, which is one of the entities under the World Bank. I was part of this market risk management unit for their portfolio, their 40 billion portfolio. So Facebook was very different, right? Facebook is a social company. So they asked Corinne, after, she declared it, they asked a few questions. They thought about it 3-4 months. But the question that we clearly, the one that was clearly a problem with them was like, is there going to be any social element to the app you're building? Yeah. Well, of course, right? Like, yeah, there is a social element counseling, right? Like, yeah. So they gave an ultimatum to Corinne. They're like, you have to decide, are you going to stay in your job at Facebook? Are you going to leave to do your startup? And this was tough. Like, so clearly, I told Corinne, this is such a big decision. You got to make it yourself, right? I'm not going to sway you one way or the other. Like, yeah, this is a very, very big decision in life, right? She thought about it for like 1-2 weeks, asked me a few questions. I remember we had maybe 1-2 calls within those 1-2 weeks. But we were already halfway through our small round at that time. So like, yeah, there was funding. She was not going to leave the job and not have salary. So that was a big part. But the other thing that made her decide to leave Facebook when she told me about it was like, she cannot imagine the regret. She will not be able to live with the regret of not knowing what this could be. Yeah. So again, right, it's not a matter of fully deciding to leave tech world you're never going to get back again. It's about spending 1, 2, 3 years to validate something, at this stage of life where you can actually afford to take that level of risk. Because when you have family and all, it gets a lot harder, right? If you have mortgage to pay, car loans to pay, you have 1, 2, 3 kids, it becomes harder and harder. And the golden handcuff, right? As you move up the career corporate ladder, the startup ladder, yeah, it becomes the golden handcuff, right? That's what they call it. You're just in a position where you're being paid such a comfortable rate. You have commitments in life. You cannot leave your job.
Yeah, you can't run away from that.
You cannot run away, exactly. So it becomes harder. So because we were so early into our careers, like, yeah, Corinne said, yeah, let's just give this a shot, right? Like, yeah, and see where it goes. If it doesn't work out, whatever, right? Like, yeah, we go back to our jobs. Especially her, right? She was in Facebook. She was not only in Facebook. She was going to be one of the fastest promoted people in her batch. So she was a superstar in her cohort at Facebook, right? So like, yeah, I told her, this truly has to be your decision. And she did it, right? And part of the other reason is like when you work in big tech, you work on very specific things. And it's not just big tech. The bigger company you work with, the more specific the thing you're going to do. The smaller it is, the bigger the range of things. It was the same as me at the World Bank, right? After the first 2-3 years, sure, I wasn't at the 100% level of what the skill set is, but maybe I've learned like 70-80% within those 20. It's the Pareto rule, right? You learn most of things within the first 2-3 years. 80%, the final 20% is going to take you whatever, right? Another 5, 7, 8 years to learn to truly be the master at it. So Corinne was working on rather specific things at Facebook, and she's like, yeah, she is curious about building things from scratch, covering a much wider range of the engineering stack rather than just front end or back end. She's going to do front, back, algo. She does everything, right? When it comes to a startup like ours. So like, yeah, that's what she wanted. That's what she got. So yeah.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, I I just like, yeah, you guys really, I think that's really brave, of anybody to be able to, you know, to go out to really like, put yourself in a position that is like stepping out of your comfort zone in order to pursue something that you really believe in, even though like everything that you had right now is already kind of clear cut to you, right? So I'm just
Yeah.
wondering for you guys, like, yeah, actually, this going back to like Mohan's question just now, like the first question about the toughest challenges, right? Like, you guys have taken that brave step towards building Council Lab Coffee Space today. What were some of the toughest days that you had and what did you like? How did you like motivate yourselves or motivate each other? Were
What
there
keeps you at night?
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, many things, right? Many things. But there are specific moments that stand out, of course, like here. So the current version of Coffee Space is really the third major iteration of the idea, right? Like every time you do a pivot, like here, that's very difficult mentally, emotionally, because you sort of are saying, okay, whatever we're working on now, it's not really working as well as we wanted it to be. Like, so do we switch, right? Do we switch ideas? Essentially, that's what happened between Council Lab and the first version of Coffee Space. The Council Lab was supposed to be this auto intro platform for alumni and students. That's what it's meant to be. Whatever I had with Kartik, Corinne had with Kartik, we wanted to do for millions more people, right? But that is the social angle. Was there an actual business to be created out of this that is truly sustainable? Or even, again, right, could it be venture backable in any way? Was a different question. It's a question that you will learn as you go deeper into the space to know what is the business argument here for this venture. So you know the problem, you know what the solution might be. The third level, really, that you should figure out as soon as possible and you should not wait, is what is the business model here? Would people pay? Who would pay for what specifically? And the faster you validate the willingness and ability to pay of your users, the better, because it is only when you ask people to pay that you get the truth of whether they truly value the solution or not. So the later you push this, like Facebook was a different time, right? They could push monetization for 4 or 5 years because, yeah, they were truly the first to reach that level of skill. And not even so, right? MySpace was actually bigger than them for the first 5 years of Facebook's existence. Facebook was number 2 till 2008 when MySpace lost. But MySpace was only 6 months older. They were always bigger than Facebook from 2003 till 2008. So, but gone are the days, right? You cannot simply hope, like Uber and all, to just burn cash year after year, millions, billions, right? Like it's just hoping someday you're going to turn a profit. So the unit economics question has gone up right in front of you, especially in the current market, because since 2021 November, the tech market has been it's basically a correction, a recession, right? Never in the 20 years of the existence of these tech companies have they laid off people en masse as what happened even in 2008's financial crisis. No, even during COVID, no, right? It was only after 2021 November, like companies started firing people in droves, right? You're talking about 10, 20, 30, 50% layoffs of people. And this is insane, right? Like this didn't happen. But throughout, when tech became a thing during the dot-com bubble, post-dot-com bubble, there was never a mass layoff of people like this. But yeah, you got to validate that there is an actual business that can be profitable here that actually does scale to become $1 billion company. So it's not just about getting to $1 billion valuation, which is roughly 100 million revenue. Generally, that's what gets you to. But 100 million revenue, if you have 200-300 million in costs, yeah, that's not really a sustainable business. Maybe you can say, cost at whatever, growth at whatever cost, right? That was the philosophy at the time when money was cheap, when interest rate was 0. No, it's no longer, right? Capital is very expensive now. Interest rates are at the 4, 5, 6% range. So capital is very, very expensive now. Why would you put something that has a 90% chance of failure when you can just put in government bonds, a fixed account, and get 6, 7% anyway, right? Like, so the relative risk to reward ratio, when interest is zero, yeah, you get zero money saving in a bank account, putting in bonds. Yeah, you're going to throw the money at riskier things like startups, but not in this day and age. So yeah, pivoting is difficult. So pivoting from the first Council Lab idea to Coffee Space was difficult. And then the question was, okay, we did this because of the problem space, then yeah, we shouldn't pivot, right? Then yeah, we're no longer solving the first problem we wanted to solve. But yeah, then it becomes a question, is there another problem you're passionate enough about to solve instead? Because a startup doesn't die till the founders quit. You have so many stories, right? Slack, right? Like Slack was supposed to be a game. It was a Series A failed like gaming company turn, but they created this chat service to be able to work better within Slack. Yeah, and it became, like much bigger than anything they would ever imagine, right? Like so. And most of the founders who do actually now have venture-backed startups, and many of them are our friends, right? They're like, this is not our first idea, Hazim. This is our second, third, fifth idea. Like, yeah. For the most part, is almost never that the first idea you work on is going to be the one that truly lifts off, becomes venture-backed. That is why the faster you experiment, the faster you learn, iterate from what truly is the problem, whether or not what you're doing is solving the problem. If it's a problem people would be willing to pay for, that can go fast. Then you work on the idea. The faster you get to what that problem space is and what the solution should be, yeah, the faster, the better it is. But yeah, some people may take 2-3 months, some people may take 2-3 years, some people may take 20-30 years, right, to get there. So so after you validate things, be objective, experiment, and look at the data, right? Look at reality, not be bounded by just subjective emotions, but yeah, by objectivity, the better it is. So yeah, to get to the third version, has required us to validate, iterate over a period of about 1-2 years. So yeah. And that's fine, right? Just what are you willing to tolerate to get there?
Yeah, I totally understand this idea of pivoting. I think changing, because changing, it's almost like you have to change what you're passionate about almost, right? In order to take into account the fact of what people are actually willing to pay for. So maybe you may kind of mention this a little bit, but Coffee Space today is different from Council in what sense? Because Council used to be, automatic matching platform for people who want to get mentoring on how to pursue their education and whatnot, right? But what about Coffee Space today? Like, what is it today? Yeah, just to let our listeners know. Totally different. Okay,
what Coffee Space is now is Tinder for co-founders. So imagine Tinder, you're swiping to find a life partner, right? What Coffee Space is, you're swiping to find a business partner. You're swiping to find someone to build a startup or company with. You're talking about a software engineer who is 2-3 years in Facebook, who has an idea, who wants to explore it with someone while they work with Facebook, Google, to see if this could be something that they truly leave their jobs for. So what Corinne and I are building now is a platform that enables more of us to exist, to allow more Hazims and Corinnes back in 2020 to find people. Because I was lucky, right? I posted something on LinkedIn, Corinne reached out, and we met at an event before that. Many people, so the US population, right? 60% of the whole US population, you're talking about 190, 200 million people, have had a business or startup idea in their lifetimes. And it's very common, right? Most people in the world would have some form of business or startup idea. But 92% of people don't do anything about it. They just think about it. They find ways to invalidate why they shouldn't. They find ways why they shouldn't do it. And they yes. So what we are doing is helping people find someone to help explore their idea with. Because when you go deeper into the reasons these 92% of people do not go forward to build, the top 3 are they don't have all the skill sets, they don't have the time, they're too overwhelmed to do it alone, because it's the fear of failure, right? If you do things alone, it's just a lot likelier for you to quit. You don't have someone who's truly at an equal level to help push you, to validate, to be your sounding board objectively, to discuss things, right? So, and if you look into all these things, almost all of them are partially, if not fully, solved by having a person. It doesn't have to be a co-founder. You can call it like what Corinne and I were. We were just idea partners, right? We just explored an idea together. That's it. So it lowers the mental barrier to entry to explore an idea. You don't have to just quit your job, become a founder, right? No. You can just sign up to an app, swipe some profiles. If you match, you talk about the idea, and then it could be more. Because I spoke to governments, even today, I spoke to someone from Cradle, from Mosti in Malaysia. I spoke to someone who understands how the Singaporean government works from the entrepreneurial side. They don't know how to get more people to try to become entrepreneurs. How do you lower the mental barrier to entry for people to build companies, right? You got a lot of very talented people in Malaysia and Singapore, Indonesia, etc., in the whole world. Why is it such that everyone who builds is in, so many of the unicorns come out of the US, right? Like it's many different things, but it's also the culture of experimentation. They do not penalize failure, right? Because failure is just another name of experimenting, finding out something doesn't work and you do something else, right? But in Southeast Asia, failure is very much this. I mean, people say like they don't want, right? It's stigmatized, right? Like,
yes,
and that is a problem because yeah, you will have to fail to get to the right thing in a startup. It's just how it works. And having this, right? Because 80% of our current users are part-time, right? They're working full-time jobs. They're just exploring the ideas part-time. But if they find someone, they explore that idea, validate that idea, and raise around, as we did, then you can do it full-time. You have to de-risk. You have to know it's an idea worth solving. You cannot just assume it's a good idea. You need to validate by going to the market. It's actually, So that is what we're building. We're building a platform that is like Tinder, Hinge, for people to find co-founders by swiping profiles based on, of course, right? The reasons people swipe right and all is not pictures. It's a lot of different data points like portfolio, which industry do you want to build in? Do you want to quit your job in the next 3 months? Are you only thinking of leaving your job in the next 12 months instead, right? Are you within a 50-mile radius? Because maybe I only want to build with someone who is within my city. So there's 10, 50 different parameters of what is in our recommendation model, right? That matches people up, or like people can filter for instead of dating apps. But in terms of user experience of seeing profiles, different different attributes of the person that makes you want to swipe right or left. Yeah, that's what the user experience on our. So.
And your business model is are you working with
exactly
like venture cap? Oh, your business model.
Exactly like Hinge, right?
Oh, okay.
It's exactly like Hinge. What is the business model of Hinge? Right? It is a freemium service. You have the free tier to have a very large network because there is an implied value. The larger the network, the more valuable, the more candidates people can filter, find. So the people, the 10% who want to help solve it fast, they subscribe to the premium version because you're monetizing official scarcity. Yeah. That is what all dating apps monetize. They create scarcity. Right? You can only get an X number of likes candidates per day. You want to unlock the top candidates, you got to pay. You want to get specific filters. So like on our app, if you only want to filter for people who have worked for a startup, launched a startup, or sold a company before, that's a premium filter. You don't need to build with someone who sold a company before. You want someone like that, you pay for the version. So it is absolutely like Hinge. We can do the second tertiary revenue lines because a lot of these people, VCs want these leads, right? Like, we will have a very, very large pool of people who can be very credible leads to be venture backed. But no, our absolute initial business model is like Hinge Tinder. It is a freemium service. You get a free version with some limited features, like, that is good enough to get you some candidates. It has to be good enough for people to stay, but you want an amazing experience to solve it fast, get specific people, you pay for that.
Amazing. Interesting. I'm curious, why build this in the US and not Southeast Asia? Because Southeast Asia, we got a lot of I recently read this article that, Southeast Asia is really a booming hub for like startups, and you can see like Indonesia, plenty of startups all the time booming out there. So why choose the US? I heard you say Europe just now. Any plans for Southeast Asia? Curious. Yeah.
Okay, there's two ways to look at this. You got the active outbounds you're doing. Yeah. where you are actively trying to engage partners, people in a certain city, country, right? But are we not allowing people from other parts of the world to join? No. Anyone in the world can join our app right now. But you have to choose, because you cannot simply say to the whole world immediately, right? When you say anyone anywhere can join, you have no focus. You're not going to appeal to anyone. Not going to create a critical mass in a particular city. What Tinder did, if you just read the history, they went to different schools, right? Campuses in the US, got a critical mass. If you think about the user experience here, you need about 50, 100 people in each city for that city to sort of come alive. It's the cold start problem. Airbnb couldn't really start in any city till they got about 100, 300 different listings in a city, such that, it kickstarted. So there is this magic number figure, and it's a lot easier to come to this magic number in many US cities than it is in different parts of the world. So it is a deliberate choice, because SF, right? I can go to any event, I can get dozens of people. Everyone there is working on an idea. Like they can be working full time, but everyone there wants to build something. So there is very little resistance. It's already part of the culture. It is already there. I don't need to say much more. I say it's Tinder for co-founders. They sign up, right? They just ask, where do I sign up? That's it. So the openness to it is a lot higher in the US, and many of the, even like the ability to pay perspective, $50 a month, which is what we charge for monthly subscription, is quite a bit, right? If you consider in Southeast Asia, in Indonesia, of course, we're going to have to optimize the pricing algorithm. Like, Tinder has different prices in all parts of the world. We'll need to do it. But US alone is sufficient a market for us to get to not only see series, maybe even Series A, Series B, right? Just capturing it really well. And a lot of people in the US are not even Americans, right? They are literally people who come from everywhere in the world. They share with their friends. So it is a melting pot. Just by capturing US, you are already getting a bunch of people from Southeast Asia, Europe, India as your users who will talk about it with their friends back home. The reverse does not truly apply. Even in Singapore, right? Sure, there's some concentration of like international people. There is nowhere near the level of internationalization and volume that the US, San Francisco have. Specifically because of what we're building is related to founders, startup ecosystem, people who want to create companies. So,
that makes a lot of sense. Totally understand. Well, I think we've almost arrived at almost the last section. You shared so much about your journey to building coffee space, right? And I'm truly very inspired, because actually I myself am very interested in startups, and I'm doing a side hustle on my own as well. Besides Borak Overseas, I'm so glad I found Mohan to do this with me.
It better be your main hustle. It better be your main hustle.
It's not this is a side project, Mohan. So compared to my others,
something I learned today. You gotta get a good partner.
Yeah, you see, Mohan is saying that I'm a very good partner, guys. Yeah.
Yes. No,
okay.
Having a good co-founder is a very, very big part. Like, I would say it's definitely one of the most important variables to create a successful company. Like,
totally
the
understand.
number of users told us, right? The stories of them not having the right co-founder and all. Like, it's as bad of like, when they split up, it's like a divorce, right? Like,
No, trust me, I have a bit of experience. I understand. Yeah, okay. But anyways, I think before we're arriving at our last section today, and it's Mohan's favorite section. Woo! Go, let's ask our favorite questions in the closing section of this episode 3. Mohan, go. Yes, go. Yes.
Okay. First of all, thank you for all the insights. Really inspiring. I think for all the young Malaysians who are out there looking to start something, I think your story would be inspiring. Definitely, it's inspiring to me. So I have 2 questions on that. So being Malaysian, one of the unique things is that we have a multiracial community and we have rich cultural heritage. Does any of that, or how does it can be applied to any business or anywhere you go, like not just business or job, or you're moving just to start a new life, living abroad?
I mean, I can share about Korean and me, right? Like, no one would know we're Malaysians, right? Like, when we pitch our idea,
it's always between Thailand and
they
Singapore.
See me, right? They see me, they see Korean. Like, these are clearly people from India and China, right? Like,
China,
like But that is the unique part, right? Because of how we look, we can just relate to like billions of people in the world, literally, right? Like, yeah, it's just then they hear our stories, right? When I talk to investors, they hear we grew up in Malaysia, studied whatever, right? UK, US, like yeah, working here, have lived in the US 8 years and all. They truly believe you have the exposure, diversity, willing, to build a global company. You have the global exposures. And Malaysia is very unique in the sense that within Malaysia itself, you already have that kind of diversity. You go to countries like even the US, right? Different parts of the US, there's very little diversity in many parts of that country. Apart from the main cities, like, maybe SF, like, yeah, New York, like Boston, many of the cities may not truly be as diverse, right? Definitely not as diverse as Malaysia. So when you grow up in a very siloed point of view, it's not necessarily a bad thing, right? It's just a function of, it's luck, right? Where you grew up, where you're born. Yeah. But Malaysia, we're just lucky because it's already a country that is diverse. So you, by default, know about different cultures. You already understand how to live in different cultures. Like, yeah, and this is very valuable when you work. Like, even when I was working with the World Bank, my team of 9 people came from like 7 countries, right? So, like, yeah, off the bat, like, yeah, you have to work with people with very different backgrounds. Like building a company, the kind of people I've had as interns, employees in the coffee space council lab before, like, yeah, as consultants, they've been from all parts of the world. And like, yeah, it's a lot easier to work with such people, to tolerate differences in like the norms, right? Societal norms, when you already have exposures to multiple and not just a single cultural background. So yes, played a huge part of me working, I mean, like, yeah, having a great time working, yeah, doing well in the World Bank, and like, yeah, raising funds for the startup, working with different people, even just like, yeah, getting users, right? Like, yeah, when you can connect with them on a specific thing or whatever, like, yeah, it goes a long, long way in terms of developing a relationship that's deeper than just a professional relationship, when you can actually engage, connect on a deeper cultural identity level.
That's really interesting. Coming from someone who's making a mark in US, making sure Malaysians are doing great.
The US was built, a large part of it was built by immigrants, right? Like, yeah, they cannot deny that. There was a stat, right? Of course, like, yeah, that 60% of the unicorns in the US have at least one immigrant co-founder, or like the direct descendant of an immigrant, right? Of a co-founder. It's just, yeah, when you put yourself in a position where you have to survive, right? I said 6 different visas just to build in that country, right? Life would be much easier if we just move to another country like the UK, whatever, Malaysia, Singapore, which actually would be a lot more accommodative. It's just because specifically of the market we're serving, right? Like, yeah, US is still. But no, when you have to go through all of these things on top of building a company, like, yeah, you just build very, very resilient people, right? And fundamentally, to build a startup, it's not about how smart you are, whatever, right? It's really, in the end, just how resilient you are and not quitting and just learning fast and figuring things out, right? Like, it really, the top thing that makes people successful in building startups is closer to like stubbornness than it is being smart. So, stubborn in an objective way, right? You learn fast. It's just resilient. You're persistent, but
it's all about the adapting.
Are resistant. I mean, they are by default trained to be much more resilient than people who have not gone through these adversities. So, yeah.
That's interesting, actually. Also, since you talk about like being a Malaysian in overseas, right? Since you lived in UK and US, after moving overseas, has your perspective of being a Malaysian has changed, or how do you see like Malaysian out of Malaysia?
So, I can say about the conversation I had with one of these Malaysians in IMF, right? So her name is Auntie Vun. I don't even remember her full name. It's been a while. But yeah, Auntie Vun has been there in the IMF for about 25 years, if not 30 years. So all her kids are Americans, right? So she's lived there like the past 30 years. And she's always been with the IMF, I think. So something unique happened, right? When Langkah Sheraton happened in 2020, where Mahathir dissolved the whole government.
I can't remember already. 2021 or 2020?
Yeah, it was during
Okay,
it was
somewhere
during
there lah. Just during COVID,
it was
yeah.
during COVID, and like Auntie Woon called for a coffee chat of all Malaysians in World Bank IMF. This was interesting, right? There were about 50 of us. There were about 50 Malaysians between IMF, World Bank, in DC. Yeah. So some of us came, right? About maybe 15, 20 of us came, like, yeah, because it was very, very short notice. So she's like, yeah, whoever is free today, let's chat. So I asked her something, right? Like after the whole thing ended, Auntie Woon, why do you care, right? Like, your kids are purely American. You've been away for like 25, 30 years. And I don't hear you wanting, you say, that, yeah, you want to go back to Malaysia immediately, right? Like, yeah, because once you get so used to a country, it becomes harder. It's the same thing as a golden cup. You get used to a certain way of life, your social group, your social friend group is all there. It becomes harder and harder to leave. So I'm like, why would you call for this coffee chat when you have left the country for 30 years? And she's like, oh, I just felt like, yeah, I like to keep abreast of what is happening in Malaysia. And this is the thing, right? People can complain all they want. They can be in any part of the world. The fact that you think about Malaysia, you complain about it, means it occupies some of your brain cells, right? Why would you
Exactly.
even think about it if you don't care about Malaysia? My friends from Bangladesh, Pakistan, whatever, right, who have been in America since they were 5'10", they don't talk about their countries anymore, right? They're like, they don't really feel association to it, but Malaysians do. And this is not, okay, maybe some other countries are like this. There are a few others I can name, right? Maybe India, like, yeah, people are also quite, like, yeah, passionate, Singapore, but Malaysia is very, very high up there in the sense of, like, people who have been abroad for years, decades, right? Still thinking, talking, complaining. It means they care. If they don't care, they're not going to complain anymore. You totally cut it out of your life, right? But no, Malaysians care. She was telling me, I don't know how I can contribute to the country. There's a way I can do it, even remotely here from DC, IMF. I would do it. I just don't know where to get started, Hazim. And this is an experience that, yeah, I mean, I talk about with my Malaysian friends in SF all the time, right? Like, yeah, we care about the country. Like, we may be away for 5-10 years, but yeah, I still have friends. The first interns we're going to get, whatever, is from Malaysia. Right? The intern we have now is from Sunway, right? Like, it's just the degree of connection to the country is so strong that no matter what you do, like, yeah, there's a way to get Malaysia involved. Like, yeah, as Auntie Woon said, right? If she knew how to get involved with policy or whatever, right, be part of an advisory board. She's already director level in IMF, right? She's very, very high up in IMF. So, like, even a person at that level who has been away for so long still cares about the country. So, and to me, this is like almost uniquely Malaysian. If not so, we are definitely in the top 5, top 3 who care about their country still after leaving for many, many years. So.
Yeah, I think that's very true for me also. I feel like because I've been to the US and the UK, right, and everywhere I go, right, even if those Malaysians are actually citizens, they become citizens of that country itself, right, we still care a lot. We still, like, if anything happens, right, we still are going all out there to, like, how can we help, right? And remember that the past general election where everybody just came together to, like, postal vote and everything, and then we ended up changing the government, and then the rest was history. So yeah, like, I totally agree with you. Like, I think that's what's very special about being Malaysian, and I hope that's something actually personally I'm very proud of as well. Like, we can be all over the world, but we actually deep down really care about our country. So I think it's very admirable. And cool. I think with that calls this episode to an end. Well, first of all, Hazim, I would just want to say this episode is packed full of like things that we just learned from you. Right? I learned something also. Yeah, it's so packed. I'm very excited to release this in the coming weeks because I think people are really gonna learn a lot from this. I learned a lot. And probably I'll call you guys out for a chat as well, because I'm also in the midst of building a side hustle or potentially startup. So I would love to talk to you guys more about it. And yeah, Mohan, welcome to Mohan's actually a lawyer, by the way, Hazim, if you didn't mention just now. So welcome to the world of, like, startups, side hustles.
That is why a lot of the terms was like news to me.
Okay.
I'm learning. This podcast,
Yeah.
today's episode is all
I
about
should have
learning
asked
from
for the backgrounds first. Yes,
you.
then I can
Yeah.
the exact words. But yeah.
Okay, yeah, but well, we are going through different industries. That's the whole I think goal of this podcast. So listeners, thank you so much for listening till the end. If you're at the end, wow, you guys really spent like almost 1.5 hours, 2 hours listening to us, and we hope you really learned something. And yeah, Mohan, do you have any last words for Hazim or our listeners before we call it to a close? Yeah.
I just wanted to thank Hazim again for actually, before breaking your fast, you allowed. I mean, you're willing to do this.
Yeah. I mean, it's already day
Amazing.
29, right? Like,
Yeah.
That's a
I think
lot.
Yeah.
28, 29, like, no. You're by this point, like,
Yes.
it's just another, like, fasting day. You get very, very much. I mean, humans adapt
Yeah.
very, very quickly to
I agree.
this. So, yeah.
Mhm.
All good, all good.
Selamat berpuasa, and
Thank you.
there's a lot to learn from your journey. So I hope our listeners, maybe they'll be inspired, or maybe they can reach out to you if
Of course,
they would
of course.
need
Happy
something.
to.
Yeah,
Like,
of course.
LinkedIn is usually the best way. So, like, I'm just Hazim Muhammad
Mhm.
on LinkedIn. Yep.
And all the best to Coffee Space.
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. I would love
Yeah.
to get on the app again because I used to use CounselLab last time. Now I'm gonna get the Coffee Space version.
It's completely
Yeah.
different now. Like,
Completely different now.
you
Yeah.
open it up, you'll see Hinge. Basically, you feel like you're on Hinge.
Okay. Not that I've used Hinge before, but okay, cool. Okay. I think.
It's good UX. It's good UI UX. Yes.
Okay. Nice. Can't wait to try it out. I think before we call it to a close, Selamat Hari Raya to everybody. And yeah, to you guys in Malaysia, please enjoy all the really, really good food, because here I am just wearing baju kurung but cannot really eat the food. But maybe I'll go look for some Malaysian, but us we all come together to cook for Hari Raya
Of
in like
course.
yes, in today's time, right? Yeah.
The Malaysian London communities will be celebrating. Maybe
Yes,
don't worry.
yes, you're right. Yes. I'm going to go join them. Yeah. I think with that, we will catch you guys around in the upcoming episode with more exciting guests that we will bring. And with that, thank you everybody. Have a good Hari Raya ahead. And sorry, by the time
Thank
it
you.
comes, maybe
Bye bye, everyone.
bye bye. Rest of Hari Raya. Yes.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.